never saw coming. It was one of the strangest and most unforgettable nights of my life. It started like any other quiet evening in our home, as the house carried its usual calm after dinner. The faint hum of the dishwasher in the kitchen, the soft creak of the old wood as the place settled for the night. I had no idea that within hours my view of my life, my family, and even myself would be forever changed. My name is Peter. Until recently, I thought I had everything figured out. I'm 40, a hard-working man who's built a modest but happy life with my wife, Laura. We've been married 19 years, and while we've had our ups and downs, I always believed we were solid. We have 2 kids. Our daughter, Clara, is off at college now, while our 19-year-old son, James, still lives at home while attending community college. James has always been a quiet kid. Laura and I used to joke that he was the calm to Clara's storm, where she was full of fire and energy. James preferred the comfort of his room, reading or tinkering with whatever project caught his interest. As he grew older, though, I noticed small changes. His shy smiles became quick glances, and sometimes I'd catch him watching me with an expression I couldn't quite place, like he was searching for something. I chalked it up to growing pains. Laura had been out of town for a few days on one of her frequent work trips. That evening, it was just James and me. We had dinner together, and I tried to make conversation, asking about school and the 3D model he'd been printing for weeks. He answered politely, but briefly, his eyes flicking to mine, then away again, almost nervously. "You all right, bud?" I asked. "You've been quiet tonight." He gave me a small smile. "Yeah, just tired." I didn't push. James had always been private, and I figured he'd open up when he was ready. Later, I went to bed. Laura's side of the bed felt emptier than ever. I missed her presence, the warmth beside me, the quiet sound of her breathing as she drifted off. But sleep wouldn't come. It was just after midnight when I heard it, a sound from downstairs. At first, I thought it was the house settling, but then I heard it again. Slow, deliberate footsteps. I got up, my heart pounding, and stepped into the hallway. James' bedroom door was wide open. He was nowhere in sight. I turned off the lights, closed my eyes, and let the soft, familiar hum of the house lull me toward sleep. Sometime in the night, I stirred to the faintest creak of my bedroom door. I squinted into the darkness, my heartbeat quickening. The room was silent except for my own breathing and a faint rustle of fabric as someone stepped closer. "Laura," I mumbled, my voice still heavy with sleep. Maybe she'd come home early, surprising me. No answer. The mattress dipped slightly. As someone sat at the edge of the bed, my foggy mind tried to make sense of it. But before I could fully wake, I felt a light touch on my leg. It was familiar. Laura often rested her hand on my arm or leg, her quiet way of saying she was there. But this touch lingered just a little too long, too cautious, as if trying to imitate her, but not quite getting it right. I opened my eyes. Moonlight spilled faintly through the blinds, and my heart froze. It wasn't Laura, it was James. My voice carried both confusion and unease. "What are you doing?" He didn't move, his hand still resting lightly on my arm. His face was half in shadow, but I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. His lips parted like he wanted to speak, but nothing came out. "Is everything okay?" I asked, sitting up, pulse pounding. I didn't mean to wake you," he murmured. "Then why?" I began. But he cut me off with a quiet "I don't know. I just wanted to make sure you were okay." I stared at him, unsure what to say. There was something fragile in his voice, something that made my chest tighten. "I'm fine, James," I said gently. "But you should get some rest. It's late." For a moment, he didn't move. Then he stood slowly, shoulders slumped. "Yeah, sorry, I'll go." I watched him leave. A strange mix of concern and guilt twisting in my stomach. I lay back down, staring at the ceiling, questions swirling. What had that been about? Had it left me so unsettled? But the strangest part, it didn't end there. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. I hadn't slept much. My mind kept replaying the way James sat on the bed, the hesitation in his voice, the strange weight of that moment. By the time I went downstairs, he was already at the table, coffee in hand, scrolling through his phone. He glanced up at me. His expression was calm, but there was a tightness in his posture. "Morning," I said lightly. "You're up early." "Yeah," he replied softly. "Couldn't sleep." I hesitated, then poured my coffee and sat across from him. "James, about last night." "I'm sorry," he interrupted, his voice sharper than I expected. "I didn't mean to startle you. Shouldn't have come in." "It's okay," I replied quickly. I was worried." "You seemed upset," he shrugged, looking back at his phone. "It's nothing. Forget about it." But I couldn't. The way he looked at me to wait behind that moment, it was too deliberate to dismiss. And deep down, I knew this wasn't the end of it. The rest of the day passed quietly. James stayed in his room for most of it, and I kept myself busy with chores and errands, hoping to shake off the lingering unease from the night before. By evening, I was exhausted and ready to collapse into bed. Tried not to think about what had happened, but my thoughts kept circling back, restless and unanswered. Why had James come to my room like that? Was something troubling him that he wasn't ready to share? Was there something else I was missing? At some point, I must have drifted off, because the next thing I knew, I was waking to the sound of the door creaking open again. My heart gave a sharp jolt and I sat up, peering into the dim light. Laura murmured, though I knew it wasn't her. A figure hesitated in the doorway before stepping inside. Moonlight spilled through the curtains, revealing James. My pulse quickened, not out of fear, but from a rising mix of confusion and concern. Oh, it felt as if I were reliving the previous night. "James," I said softly, my voice carrying both worry and fatigue. "What's going on? Why are you here again?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he crossed the room and sat at the edge of the bed, his posture slouched, his hair tousled from sleep. There was a weariness about him that made him seem smaller, almost fragile. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, his eyes fixed on the floor. "I know this is strange. I just didn't want to be alone." "Why?" I asked, my tone gentler now. "Talk to me, James. What's happening?" He hesitated, his hands fiddling with the hem of his shirt. I don't know. With Mom gone and Clara not here, the house feels so empty. I guess I just wanted to feel close to someone. Words landed heavier than I expected. I'd been so caught up in my own loneliness during Laura's absence that I hadn't stopped to think about how James might be feeling. He had always been quiet, reserved, but maybe that was his way of coping with the same emptiness I was wrestling with. It's okay, I said, placing a hand on his shoulder. You're not alone, James. I'm here. He glanced up, searching my expression, and for a moment, the silence between us felt deep and unspoken. I gave his shoulder a reassuring squeeze and tried to lighten the mood. Come on, said, patting the other side of the bed. If it helps, you can stay here for a while, but you have to promise to actually sleep. A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. All right, thanks, Dad. He lay down, keeping a respectful distance, and I switched off the light. Only sounds were our slow, even breaths. I could feel his presence beside me, steady and quiet, and eventually I drifted into a light, uneasy sleep. Somewhere in the night, I woke again, alert, but unsure why. The room was still and shadowed. Then I felt it, a light tap on my arm. James, I whispered, my voice thick with sleep. He didn't speak at first, but I sensed the hesitation in his movements. I'm sorry, he finally said, his voice barely audible. I just had a bad dream. Relief softened the tension in my chest. I turned toward him and spoke quietly. It's all right. You're safe here, he nodded, pulling the blanket closer. And I stayed awake for a while longer, listening to the sound of his breathing until my own eyes finally closed again. Before I could say anything, he stepped closer, resting his hand lightly on my shoulder. A gesture so fleeting and gentle, it caught me off guard. What are you doing? I asked, my voice trembling, but not from fear. I don't know, he admitted, his voice unsteady. I just don't know. The air between us felt heavy, the silence stretched tight like a wire. I wanted to say something to break it, but my mind was racing too fast. He stepped back slightly, his face clouded with uncertainty. I'm sorry, he whispered. I shouldn't have. I'll just go. Before I could respond, he was gone, disappearing into the hallway and leaving me with the weight of the moment. What he didn't know was that I didn't mind the closeness. It was strange, yes, but it made me realize how much I valued his presence. I'd never experienced this kind of connection before, but I decided to let it go for now and invite him to spend time with me again tomorrow. Maybe then we could talk about it. The next day, I couldn't focus on anything. My thoughts kept circling back to him. His hesitant touch, his quiet apology. He avoided me all morning, staying in his room with the door closed. I told myself he probably needed space. Maybe I did too. But as the hours passed, the tension in the house became unbearable. By my afternoon, I found myself standing outside his door, my hand hovering inches from the wood. For a moment, I considered walking away, but instead I knocked softly. Can we talk? I called, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a pause, then footsteps. When he opened the door, his usual guarded look was gone, replaced with something softer, more vulnerable. "Hey," he said quietly, stepping aside to let me in. I entered, taking in the neat, orderly room, but the air felt hesitant, almost fragile. He gestured for me to sit, and I did, though my nerves were telling me to leave. "I just wanted to check in," I began. "About last night." He winced slightly. "I'm sorry. I know it was awkward. I shouldn't have." "It's okay," I interrupted gently. "I'm not upset. I just want to understand what's going on. I want to tell you something." He fidgeted with his hands. "I guess I just feel really alone sometimes. And when the house is quiet, it's like the walls are closing in. Even when you're here." His words hit harder than I expected. I'd always tried to be there for him, but hearing he still felt alone stung. "I'm sorry if I've made you feel that way," I said softly. "You're not alone. I'm here for you always." He nodded, but kept his eyes down. "I know. It's just not the same." "Hey, what do you mean?" I asked. He hesitated, then said, "It's hard to explain. I just want to feel close to someone really close, and I'm not sure how to do that." His voice was raw, his honesty heavy in the air. I didn't have all the answers, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let him feel alone anymore. Another part of me, one I didn't want to acknowledge, felt an inexplicable pull toward him. "James," I began carefully, "I think you're confused. It's normal to feel." "I'm not confused," he said firmly, cutting me off. His eyes locked on mine with a quiet intensity that made my chest tighten. "I know what I feel. I know it's not normal, but I can't help it." I opened my mouth to respond, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, we sat in silence, the weight of his confession pressing down like a storm cloud over the room. I wanted to comfort him, to tell him it would be okay, but I didn't know how. This was uncharted territory, and I was completely lost. Night, I tried to act like everything was normal. We had dinner, talking about small things, school, work, the kind of conversations that keep the air light, but underneath it all was a tension we didn't name. I could feel his gaze on me when I looked away, and it left me unsettled in ways I couldn't explain. When I went to bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that the night wasn't over. Lying in the dark, James' words replayed in my mind, his voice full of vulnerability that left me breathless. Finally, I got up and walked to his room. He was still awake. "James," I whispered. He didn't answer right away, but I knew he heard me. "Would you like to just sit with me for a while?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Are you sure?" "Yes," I said quietly. He followed me to my room and sat on the edge of the bed, his hands resting on his knees. For a moment, we just sat there, in the low light, the air heavy with unspoken words. "Please, don't leave right now," he said softly, his voice trembling. I swallowed hard. "All right, but we'll talk about this in the morning." He gave a small, grateful smile and lay back, staring at the ceiling, lay beside him, keeping a careful distance. The mix of emotions inside me, concern, confusion, and an ache I couldn't name, swirled like a storm. I didn't know where this would lead, but I knew one thing for sure. This was far from over. He finally stepped back, his eyes, searching mine, filled with a storm of fear, longing, and something dangerously close to hope. "James," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. "We can't. This isn't." "I know it's complicated," he cut in, his voice trembling. "But I can't keep pretending. Can't keep hiding how much this matters to me." "You don't mean that," I said, shaking my head. "You're confused? This isn't real." "It is real," he said firmly, locking eyes with me. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." His words hit me like a wave, leaving me breathless. I wanted to argue to tell him he was mistaken, but the conviction in his voice, the raw honesty in his gaze, made it impossible to dismiss what he felt. "I don't know what to do with this," I admitted, my voice cracking. "Okay, I don't know how to fix it." "You don't have to fix anything," he said, reaching out and taking my hand. His touch was steady, grounding, and despite my better judgment, it made my heart race. "Just let me in." I pulled my hand away, my chest tightening. "James, this isn't about what I want. It's about what's right. And this doesn't feel right." He looked down, shoulders slumping. "I know you think that," he said quietly. "But I also know there's a part of you that's not sure." His words hung in the air like a weight I couldn't shake. Is it guilt I felt, or fear, or something else I didn't want to name? I stayed silent for a long moment, trying to steady my breathing. The tension between us shifted, still charged, but different, not dangerous, just unspoken. "Finally," I said, "let's not lose ourselves in this." "Not now." He met my gaze again, and for the first time, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of everything we couldn't bring ourselves to say. I can't explain every detail. I can tell you it was intense, emotional, sensitive, and from his side, I think, a little hurtful. He seemed to take his role in the conversation far more seriously than I expected. I could tell from the way he said my name after I'd finished speaking. When it was over, we just sat there in silence, unsure of what had just unfolded. "You okay, son?" I asked. "Yes, Dad. Don't worry about me. I just need a moment. I'll go to the bathroom, and then maybe we can just get some rest." That's the last thing I remember vividly. I think I drifted off while he was still gone the next morning. I woke early, my thoughts circling back to what had happened the night before. I was halfway through my coffee when I heard footsteps on the stairs. I didn't need to look to know. It was James. His presence filled the room before he even spoke. "Morning," he said softly, his voice uncertain. I turned to face him with a small smile. Morning coffees on the counter. Nodded, poured himself a cup, and for a moment, we just stood there in silence. The air between us was heavy, like a storm about to break. Finally, I set my mug down. "James, we need to talk." His shoulders tensed. "About last night?" he asked quietly. "About everything," I replied. "I need to understand what's going on with you and with us." He hesitated, looking down at the floor. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've just been carrying this around for so long, and I couldn't anymore. I know I didn't handle it right, but I can't pretend it's not there." His words hit me hard. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that maybe he was just confused, but I could see in his eyes this wasn't just a passing mood. James said carefully, Whatever you're feeling, it's complicated. Can't just act without thinking it through. I know, he said quietly. But that doesn't make it go away. The silence returned heavier this time. I wanted to reassure him, to tell him it would all be okay, but I didn't know how. This was new territory for both of us. One wrong step, and everything could shatter. The rest of the day was awkward, to say the least. James stayed in his room, and I kept myself busy, but the conversation echoed in my head like a shadow I couldn't shake. I spent most of the day trying to stay busy, cleaning, running errands, anything to keep my mind from wandering. But no matter what I did, I kept thinking about James. The way he'd looked at me the other day, so open and vulnerable, made my chest feel tight by evening. I was sitting in the living room with a glass of water, the quiet settling around me. That's when I saw him in the doorway. He looked hesitant, his hands shoved into his pockets, but there was a determination in his eyes. "Can I sit?" he asked quietly. I nodded. He walked over and sat down, leaving a bit of space between us. "I'm sorry," he said after a long pause, "for making things awkward. I didn't mean to. I just didn't know how to handle it." "I know," I said softly. "It's okay. We'll figure it out." He looked at me again, his eyes filled with that same raw honesty. "Do you still care about me?" His voice was barely above a whisper. "Of course I do," I replied instantly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You're my son. Nothing will change that." He seemed to relax a little at my touch. "I just want us to be close again," he said, his voice trembling. I missed that. Something inside me ached at his words. I pulled him into a hug, holding him tightly. "I'm here," I whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." For a moment, it felt like things might really be okay, like we could start to heal and rebuild what we'd lost. When he finally stepped back, his eyes were glossy with unshed tears. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for not giving up on me." Couldn't speak past the lump in my throat, so I just squeezed his hand. "James," I said softly, "we'll get through this together." He gave me a small, hopeful smile. "I know we will." As he walked away, I knew our journey wasn't over, but for the first time in a long while, I felt we might actually make it.